So I had to remake this entire video. I did about 37 minutes worth of footage yesterday and boiled it down to about 17 minutes. And while I was editing it, I just knew I wasn't getting my point across properly. My thoughts were just so jumbled everywhere. One of the hardest things to do is when talking about very complicated subjects like this is being able to properly gather your thoughts, but then also present them. So I took the video over to my keyboardist Jesse yesterday and I went through it with him and we sat down and had a long discussion. That was incredibly helpful, and now I'm going to try and hopefully present this information in a much more clear and coherent manner. TwelveTone, who I think is actually a very good music channel, made a video responding to Ben Shapiro saying he doesn't think rap is music. I actually don't think rap is music either, but we'll get into that. Now, I am sure there is going to be a lot of infuriating comments in the comment section today, which are going to stress me out and make me want to pull my damn hair out, which is why I'm so happy for today's sponsor, Keeps. Stress is a big contributing factor to male pattern baldness, and 2 out of 3 men will experience male pattern baldness by the time they are 35. Luckily, with advancements in science, Keeps has solutions for me and for all of you to keep that from happening. Instead of having to go to a doctor's office and deal with long waits and having to deal with the embarrassment of dealing with this subject, Keeps lets you go online, talk to a licensed doctor who will prescribe to you the medicine you need, and it'll be shipped right to your door. Prevention is the key, and Keeps has been shown 90% effective at preventing hair loss. Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its other competitors, and over 100,000 men have trusted Keeps with preventing their hair loss. Keeps treatments start at just $10 a month, and for a limited time, you can get 50% off your first order. The sooner you treat, the more hair you'll save. Act fast. Go to keeps.com/night to get 50% off your first order. Again, that is KEEPS.com/night. Now, I think TwelveTone did a good job of saying that Ben Shapiro's definition of music and him saying that rap isn't music is just poor arguments, and I agree. Ben's definition of music is a combination of discernible melody, harmony, and rhythm. I think that's far too restrictive and simplified. So TwelveTone explains why, even within these parameters, rap is still considered music, which he does a decent job of. Then he goes on to reference one of his other videos, What Even Is Music?, where he defines music, and his definition of music is actually worse than Ben's. TwelveTone's definition of music is whatever you find musical, and this is very clearly bad logic. To present it in a medium in which TwelveTone may be able to better understand it. To be able to set up a basis from any logical argument fashion as to whether something is or isn't music, we need some sort of definition for what music is so we can set up parameters. So the obvious question from you is, Mike, how do you define music? I don't have a strict definition. It's very clear that humanity is still trying to discover what that is. That's why we have experimental music. I think a large part of how we identify and understand music is intuition. I have both faith and an intuition that there is some objective way of being able to define music. I don't think that we have enough data available to really understand that. I don't know if we have the technology available to gather that data. But if you look at something as simple as a child trying to learn the guitar and making a ton of mistakes, the mistakes we wouldn't call music, we would call it a mistake. I think the fact that we separate music from language and noise, and these are all understood things universally by humanity, in and of itself points that there is some sort of concrete definition for it. And more accurately to the sentiment of TwelveTone's point being that we as humans choose when to interpret something musically, I think there is some merit to that. I haven't even touched on rap yet because this is such a complicated subject just to set up. I was able to get a significant amount more clarity just having about an hour conversation with Jesse yesterday, and being able to have any type of discussion or logical debate about how to define music and therefore what's included and excluded from that. You need to, first of all, go in with an open mind and honesty, but you also need to make sure that both parties are using the same definitions, and sometimes you have to have a discussion as to what each of these words mean and what they really are. Definitions are extremely important when having any type of conversation like this because of their semantic concreteness, which leads me towards why I don't think rap is music. Perlovsky wrote an academic paper called Cognitive Function in Music, and I'm going to read from his abstract. Now, keep in mind, this is a theory, this is not scientific fact, but this will be the basis to build the logic that I will be constructing in order to show you why I don't think rap is music. He presents a hypothesis that is attempting to unify the fields of cognition and music. He proposes a theory upon the origin of music based upon music's role in cognitive function. He says the split is considered of the vocalizations of proto-humans into two types. One, less emotional and more concretely semantic, evolving into language, and the other preserving emotional connections along with semantic ambiguity, evolving into music. So words that humans use that have concrete definitions, semanticism, as opposed to music or sounds that humans use that have an ambiguous meaning to them. You can project your own meaning to them. The evolution of language towards the semantically powerful tool that it is today required emancipation from emotional encumbrances. The way your brain emotionally interprets just the sound coming out of my mouth, not what the words mean that I'm using, is less important than what the definitions of the words are. The emotion of the inflection in my voice or my body language is all dependent upon the semanticism of the words. They take priority. Opposing but no less powerful mechanisms required a compensatory evolution of music towards more differentiated and refined emotionality. Because language got so much more precise, we needed music to have more precise emotionality expressed. They actually grew further apart. The fundamental need for refined music is grounded in fundamental mechanisms of the mind. This is why today's human mind and cultures cannot exist without today's music. His hypothesis is that the fundamental cognitive function of music is to help resolve cognitive dissonances created by language. So basically, the human mind cannot work on semanticism alone. There is a very strong emotional part of our brains that we don't fully understand and kind of is hard to nail down. Music is a way of getting in touch with this side of our brains. So if we can agree that there is a difference between language and music, I think we can agree with this. We have to say, okay, so there's semantically ambiguous sound, which can be music, it can just be random noise. And then there's a dividing line where we hit language. You might even be able to say there's a spectrum over which we go between language and ambiguous sound. The reason why I think there's probably a harder line between language and ambiguous sound is because language is based in coding. You have to be able to use the code, understand the code to be able to communicate with it. That is, understand it and be able to send information with it. So why does all of this matter as far as rap goes? Well, my first point, but not my primary point, the word rap has actually been diluted from its original meaning. The music community and also just a lot of underprivileged communities tend to use slang a lot more in an approximative language as opposed to precise language, which really can muddy the waters when we start to look at the logical arguments of it because our definitions are sullied. During the hip-hop movement, when it came to the art of rapping, rapping was the spoken word itself. If that rapping had a beat behind it, that was the musical component, those two were combined, and then another integral part was dancing, but that's not important to this. The MC rapped and the DJ made the music that accompanied it. So if we're looking at a strict purist definition of what rapping actually is, I mean, if you just played that back by itself, just the spoken word, I don't think most people would call that music. It is very clearly semantically driven. Not that there aren't some strong musical elements to it, but I mean, at the end of the day. But that's not the entire point I'm trying to make, though I think it does help support my actual point. Let's use the colloquial definition of what rap means. Colloquially, if we say that's rap, we are talking about a combination of the rapper's words with the DJ's beats behind it. My argument is that even then, the focus is still primarily on semanticism over ambiguity, drawing from Perlovsky saying that music is much more ambiguous. Now, I will definitely be the first to admit I have listened to a number of rap songs that my first or several listenings or even listenings afterwards, I perceive from a musical perspective. I consume it as music. But just because a person perceives something from a musical perspective that is not latching on or paying attention to the semantic side of the art, that does not mean inherently that it is music. For example, if I'm listening to Russian, I have no idea what they are saying. To me, it is just noise. But is that ambiguous sound? We all have enough context. I mean, even just the truth itself is that the person who is communicating this has an intent to communicate semantically. Just because I observe it as noise does not mean that that becomes noise. So in rap, I think that the intent is also important. In a lot of arts, I would say the intent is very important in order to fully appreciate the art. And I would say in music, intent is the least important thing because of its ambiguity. Another example would be this speech from Independence Day.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night, we will not vanish without a fight, we're going to live on, we're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.
It has a lot of similar elements to rap. It has a vocal part up front with definable rhythm, inflection, definitive tone, intentionality, and there is a musical accompaniment behind it that is complementing it, that is clearly rhythmically aligned to accentuate the performance. It is technically possible to remove the picture and just absorb the sound and say, oh, I'm looking at this like a song, but we know that the intent is not for this to be a song, this is a speech. So movies can have very similar characteristics to rap music, but we would not call that movie music. We wouldn't call that segment a song. Music is a highly subjective art form, and I feel like rap's semanticism being a primary focus really draws away from the ability to interpret for yourself. For clarity, I'm not saying that rap can't be interpreted multiple ways, but it definitely narrows down the definitions. So the next argument back at my point is, well, what about lyrics in other songs and other music? Again, I would point back to what is the focus. In most rap songs that I know, the focus, the primary thing is the semantic storytelling. A prime example of this would be folk. I also think folk much more accurately fits in storytelling than it does in music. Even if you look at a lot of examples of rap and folk, the actual musical portions play a secondary role to the primary role of communicating a story, but making it in a more emotional tinted format. When you look at even pop music or a lot of other genres, the lyrics most times are very secondary. The focus is on the emotional manipulation and how that song makes you feel based upon the ambiguous sound, even though the words that are being spoken aren't being interpreted semantically. This is where Jesse brought up a great point, is that all art is in one way or another storytelling. And one distinction I would make with music is that it is much easier to project your own story onto this art because it is more ambiguous. Whereas in most rap, that story is relatively strictly defined. So you could say, in my opinion, the stricter you define the story for people, the less musical it becomes, in my opinion. And also, if we look at Perlovsky as our root of this logic, semantic versus ambiguous, that works. Now, I want to make sure I'm clear. By me saying that rap isn't real music, I'm not trying to be one of those jerks who uses definitions as a way of demeaning and crapping all over someone else's art. I love rap. I love hip hop. And part of my appreciation for it is, in my opinion, realizing that it so perfectly walks this fine line between musicality and semanticism. It's almost dead center. To the point of saying that it is a semantic or musical art doesn't do it justice. It kind of sits in this great, what is right now a no man's land, and I think it deserves a home. I think it deserves its own defining art form by itself, outside of music and outside of poetry. Now, for the record, Jesse, after our conversation, still doesn't agree with me. He still thinks that rap is music. He doesn't know that it's useful to try and define it so distinctly. At what point is over-defining things less useful than it is more useful? One of the reasons we use definitions is because of their utility. In my opinion, the utility of it helps you further appreciate it. There are a lot of people who don't like rap who I think would better understand rap if they knew how to, no pun intended, wrap their brains around it. There is a certain, I would say almost zen-like space you can get into listening to good rap, and it's not the same as music, and it's not the same as poetry. It's its own well-defined headspace for me, at least. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I am very interested to hear your thoughts. If you have other papers that have different theories other than Perlovsky, please share them. If you disagree with my analysis and you want to use the reasoning of Perlovsky, by all means, please share it. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, if you like what I do in this channel, please share. Please hit that like button and leave your thoughts below. That really helps the channel out a lot. Please support me on Subscribestar. That is the only way I can keep making badass videos for you. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Become the Night. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Rock on!